Welcome back, one and all, to another event for scoutthestatline.com. Hi, I'm Brian, as always, and my compadre, as always, is Mr. Ross Jensen. Tonight, we are bringing you the top 30 outfielders.
Well, it's only fair because if you think about it, we're covering three positions: left field, center field, right field. So, 30.
Yeah. I think outfield's probably the funnest one to dive into every year because you have whatever you like. You know, there's speed guys, there's power guys, there's average guys.
It seems like catcher was pretty deep, first base really thin, and we're hopping to the outfield now. And a lot of variety, like you were saying.
Yeah, there's some fun guys in here too that I think a lot of people are going to look at and be like, "Wow, how did I miss this guy?" Because I know I will. I know I'm going to say it like 4 times. How did I miss that guy?
Awesome.
Yeah. So before we get started, as always, we have to introduce our beers of the podcast. And I got a new one. To me that I've never even tried before. It comes in a 6-pack, little brown box. But this one is Two Hearted Ale. And it's from Bell's in, I think it was, Comstock, Michigan is where this one comes out of. 7% American IPA. I've never had it before. It looked good, so I bought it. And I'm gonna pour it in a glass because I wanted to see what this one looked like. So look at there. Got a pretty sweet glass, left coast.
San Clemente.
Yeah. Pretty good looking beer.
Yeah.
Get a head on it. Yeah.
Got a nice hue.
I read on the box that it has grapefruit and pine hop aroma and grapefruit. It's damn good. It's a good beer.
Did you pick up on that with your first sip?
Connoisseur that I am, of course I did.
Awesome.
It's good. What do you got?
All right. So I'm going with, see if I can get this in the camera. Arrogant Bastard Ale. Have you ever heard of this before?
I've called you that many times.
Yeah, well, this is a little bit different because this is more fun. So I can't tell you much about this. Brewed in Escondido, California. They didn't have a designation on a specific type of ale, so just a general ale. I do want to read some of the description. I was looking it up online. 7.2% alcohol ABV, so it's a little bit stronger, but this is the opening line. This is an aggressive beer. You probably won't like it. It is quite doubtful that you have the taste or sophistication to be able to appreciate an ale of this quality and depth. So we're going to find out. It goes on some tangents about tyranny and how the arrogant bastard is sticking up against tyranny. So, hey, that sounds good to me. I'm going to give it a shot. It's got a little bit darker of a hue.
A little dark. That's one thing that I don't like in my beer. I don't like dark beers.
Yeah, I don't know that I would call this. It's certainly not like porter,
not heavy. Yeah.
Porter or stout dark, but darker than your typical American Pale or IPA. So let's give it a shot. Maltier for sure.
Is it?
Yeah, maltier, but very good. Yeah, I mean that's kind of a dalliance somewhere between a pale and a porter, I would say. Yeah, but it's good. I'm gonna enjoy
cheers, buddy. Cheers. But let's jump into it. Let's jump into the next segment of Bats and Stats.
Bats and Stats.
Bats and Stats, baby. Coming in at number 30, Nolan Jones, a Colorado Rocky. He's 24 years old. Big guy, 6'4", 195, third baseman, Nolan Jones. So Nolan Jones, I was a big fan. I want to say that when he was probably 2 years ago, somewhere in that range. Apparently, and this little tidbit about Nolan Jones, he was one hell of a hockey player. Like really, really good at hockey before he just decided to play baseball full time. But just a few stats. Well, I'll run through it. In 2016, in rookie ball, he had 109 at bats. His slash line looked 257 average, 388 OBP, 339 slugging. Nothing to really stand out yet. It was just 109 at bats in his rookie season. But then in 2017, he got 218 at bats, hit 4 home runs, just 1 stolen base, but his average was sitting at 317. On base was 430, and his slugging was 482. This is when he started climbing up some prospect lists and stuff like that. Once we got into 2018 in single A ball, full and advance, he got a total of 427 at bats, batted 283, on base 405, slugging 466, 19 dingers that year. So he's really started showing a lot in single A ball in 2018. 2019, we've seen him pop up. He did advanced A again for 252 at bats, batted 286, home runs 7, but then got a call up at age 21-ish to double A. Got it 178 at bats there, batted 253, on base 370, slugging 466, 8 dingers with those, couple stolen bases. That's not what this guy's going to be. He's not going to be a speed guy. He's going to be a big guy, I believe. As I stated, 195 at 24 years old. He's probably got another 20 pounds to throw in there to really juice the bat. After we seen him after the 2020 season, obviously we didn't get any stats there, but in 2021, he spent the full time at AAA, and his slash line was 238, 356, slugged 431, 13 home runs. So we did see a dip. The strikeout concern popped up a little bit in AAA. He struck out 122 times. He had 81 hits. So this is where I suppose before that I should have jumped in and said his walk to strikeout ratio was decent. He was really showing a good plate discipline. And then in 2021, he just had a bad year. And I think I'm going to say that. I think 2021, he just had a bad year. It wasn't ugly by any means. It was just a little concerning. So AAA this year, he had 214 at bats, averaged 276, on base 368, slugged 463. So he had some decent power numbers. But that's where I say that 21 was kind of a flaw, I guess, in his statistical output. He struck out a ton in 2021. He really didn't strike out a ton in 2022. He only had 64 strikeouts compared to 31 walks in 214 at bats. So I really think that 2021 was an anomaly. Ross, what do you got on him?
So to me, Nolan Jones was a guy that I always felt was overrated when he started rising up in the ranks. Strikeout rate was always a problem. Everybody talked about this power that didn't really seem to show up in games that much. So I always felt he was being overrated based on projection that wasn't quite there to me. That said, right now he might be slightly underrated. I think he's fallen off the list so much that people are now starting to overlook him a little bit. That doesn't mean I'm recommending that everybody go get this guy right away. I think he's a guy that could be a useful plug-in, but I don't think he's a guy to build around or anything like that. So that's what I mean when I say he's a little underrated now. He's free agent fodder in some leagues. I don't think he's quite that bad. I think he's a role player, a bench player maybe. he strikes out too much.
Yeah.
For a guy that's known for being a power hitter, there just doesn't seem to be that many home runs. And he was traded this offseason to the Rockies for Juan Brito, which I think signals a couple things. I think it signals the Guardians are moving on from Nolan Jones, and they see something in Juan Brito. And on the flip side of it, his ability to hit with that power that may or may not be a figment of people's imaginations, maybe that'll play up in the thin air of Colorado, which could be really good for his career. So high walk rate, a lot of strikeouts. The bat is okay. Looking at his peak projections, he's really grades out as an average player. 50 hit, 50 power, and 45 speed. So he's not going to be a fast player, but pretty average across the board. So we'll see how that works as a Rocky. And honestly, I like that he's ranked in the Scout the Statline top 30 outfielders, because I think it reflects what I was saying, that he was overrated before and now he's a little underrated. If you need to plug somebody in, he's probably going to be in the major leagues this year. So he could be the guy that is your stopgap at the very least.
For sure. But yeah, that's number 30. Let's jump right into number 29, Mr. Drew Waters, Kansas City Royal. He's 23 years old. I'm just not a huge fan of Drew Waters, but he has had some pretty decent years in the minors. Actually, kind of impressive numbers. Ross, why don't you dive into the numbers a little bit and give us what you got?
I'm interested in hearing your perspective, actually, because this guy was a few years ago, he was rising up a lot of rankings. And I wouldn't say he came out of nowhere, but he was kind of a surprise rising into top 100 lists.
Dude, he could have touched top 10 in some of the rankings. It was close.
Possible.
Yeah.
In some, I mean, probably the more obscure ones, but
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he was certainly moving up there. I'm looking at some of the big lists right now, and he was top 30, even cracked into the top 20s on MLB.com's list in 2020. So he moved down a little bit on MLB's list, but he continued to move up on like Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus. I'm sort of surprised, and I feel that he's still prospect eligible now. He's had some major league exposure, 109 plate appearances. He's still prospect eligible. But I think after this season, his stock is going to drop. Do you agree or disagree?
I would, well, I mean, obviously on the way he plays, I mean, he might start in that Royals outfield, so we could see a big taste of him as early as, well, it'll be this year.
Okay. Well, let me run through the stats and let's see if this changes your mind. So when he really started moving up the list was about 2019, but he had a couple decent seasons before that. Rookie level in 2017 as an 18-year-old, he hit 278 with a 362 OBP and a 429 slugging percentage. The power wasn't there yet. In fact, he wasn't really showing a lot, not a lot of stolen base numbers, not a lot of counting stats. But he was a young kid at that time. 2018, this is, I think, where his stock started rising a little bit. Yeah. He hit 294 with a 343 OBP and a 476 slugging percentage. 9 home runs on that season, almost 500 plate appearances, so a pretty large sample, and 23 stolen bases. And 2019, this is where you started seeing him become a top 100 type of prospect. And this is interesting to me. The surface stats look good. The slash line looks nice. 309 batting average, 360 OBP, and a 459 slugging percentage. He hit 7 home runs, so not a ton of over-the-fence power still, but continuing to develop 16 stolen bases. The flip side of that is he struck out 164 times.
Yep.
So this was a guy that I was always skeptical because of that. His plate discipline is, in my estimation, a little questionable. Along with those 164 strikeouts, he only had 39 walks. So not a lot of walks, a lot of strikeouts. But still, he was just 20 years old and he was playing in the high minors. That was across AA and AAA. A little bit of slack should be deserved for somebody that young. So as a 22-year-old, he repeated AAA. His numbers were way down, way down.
Yeah.
He had 240, with a 329 OBP, and a 381 slugging percentage. His numbers on the season were 269 batting average, 345 on base percentage, and a 460 slugging percentage. The most power he's shown so far in the minor leagues really was this year, at least over the fence power.
Mm-hmm.
Continued to run. He stole 18 bases, so pretty decent counting stats. So not bad, but I'm still skeptical of this guy and his ability to be a successful major leaguer.
So I want to touch on just stats in general. So in 2019, he had 163 hits. He struck out 164 times. So he had more strikeouts than hits. That wasn't the last time he will do that. He did that in 21, and he had 97 hits and 142 strikeouts.
Yeah, it's getting worse.
So like a serious problem. That's not a small problem. That's like holy cow problem.
Yeah.
Like turn around and walk as fast as you possibly can out of the dark alley.
Well, and another red flag is he was traded from the Braves to the Royals. So I think he had a nice bounce back after he went to the Royals, but I think that indicates that the Braves were moving on from him. They no longer valued him as a top prospect. So that's another factor to take into consideration as well.
Yeah. I just wanted a little highlight. I was really excited to see an outfield of Ronald Acuna Jr., Christian Pache, and Drew Waters. They were all three center fielders. They were all really good at defense. And then the bats were going to kind of start, showing up. Acuna's already got his bat and everything, but it was going to be those three, and it was just going to be this really dynamic outfield. And now Pache is in Oakland and Drew Waters is in Royal. Moving on, we're going to jump into the next one, number 28, Andy Pages, a Los Angeles Dodger, and he's 21 years old. Had a little bit of a hiccup at the start of 2022 where it was ugly. Did you see the same thing that I'm talking about right now?
Yeah.
It was about mid-season, and the stats were not pretty. And then he turned it on. He turned it on, and he turned it on hard.
Yeah, coming into this season, I felt Andy Pages had some of the best power in the minor leagues. I think after this season, I'm not sure that I still feel like he's one of the best power hitters, but the power is still there, clearly. Yeah. And he rebounded in the second half and cobbled together a pretty decent season. He was getting pretty hot through some stretches. But I think finally the strikeouts started catching up to him.
Yeah.
And I think with somebody that has as much power as he does, you can be forgiven a little bit for striking out a little bit more when you're hitting more bombs. But with Pages, I think finally getting up to AA, that was a big test, 21 years old. So he's the right age for the level, but he only hit 236 this year, so he wasn't able to carry a higher batting average like he has in the past. Walk rate was down this year. Strikeout rate was up. It's not the kind of trend you like to see, but I still think he can rebound in 2023. And if he does, there's a lot of power potential here. He could be a cog in the middle of a lineup, maybe not with the Dodgers, but I think in most lineups he would fit pretty well in the middle, like a 5 or 6 hitter maybe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, once again, 2021, 116 hits, 132 strikeouts. 2022, 115 hits, 140 strikeouts. That Instantly I look at that and I don't want any part of it. I just want to walk away. I'm okay with strikeouts. I'm okay to have high strikeout numbers, but when it's more than you're hitting the ball, it's just fundamentally wrong.
So it's interesting, having just talked about Drew Waters, because Andy Pages strikes out at a lower clip than Drew Waters, but Andy Pages is a power hitter. So typically they strike out more. So I'm willing to be more forgiving of Andy Pages' strikeout rate than I am of somebody like Waters, who's supposed to be more of a contact type of hitter. He draws a comp to Eugenio Suarez with the Mariners, third baseman. That seems fairly suitable for Andy Pages. He might have some 30 home run seasons, maybe even a 40 home run season in there. Probably not going to carry a lot of high batting averages. But if he hit 280, 270 some years in there, it wouldn't terribly surprise me either.
Yeah. We got a couple years for Pages too, I think, especially in the Dodgers system. Yeah, he could get traded away, but he can sit in the minors and try to figure out these strikeouts a little bit longer, since he is a Dodger, which I think that's a plus for him. And the way the Dodgers are ran, maybe he never sees the field in the Dodgers, just because they'll plug and play free agents and stuff like that. So he's going to have to get pretty hot. He's going to have some good stats to get plugged into the Dodgers organization, I guess.
I'd agree. Our ETA tool has him up for 2024.
That's fine. I thought he was bigger than that. He's only 6'1", 212.
Yeah, not a real big guy, but a lot of power.
It's like me walking around. That's not cool.
Eugenio is only 5'11", 213, so it might not be too bad of a comp.
Yeah.
Even last year, I really liked Andy Pages. The veneer has dimmed a little bit. It's not quite as shiny, but I still think he's going to be an interesting player. I'm not giving up the farm to get him at this point, but I do think he's going to be a starter somewhere in the outfield.
Cool. That's Andy Pages. Is the average age for Double-A? You said earlier that Andy Pages is right on track in Double-A at 21. Isn't average age in Double-A like 24? These guys are pretty young.
Yeah. When I say like he's on track, I'm not going based on the average. I'm going based on where I typically see success, correlating with the age level. So to me, 21 is like you're on track. You're progressing as you're supposed to. You start getting much older than that, then I start having concerns that you're just kind of, you're older than some of the competition that you're playing against. So you've had more physical maturity by that point. I'm looking at it right now. Average age in Double-A is just under 24. So yeah, you're spot on. But I would say I still am looking for somebody that's about 21. Probably not. I don't want to say at max. That's not the case, but 21 is about that right age. 22, you start getting much older than that. And I'm kind of thinking, well, this guy should be up to AAA by now if he's going to make the major leagues. So.
Yeah. No, I get it. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep. Good clarification.
Let's jump into number 27, Aaron Zavala. He's a Texas Ranger. He's 22 years old. Can you run through it with us, Ross?
He's a guy that a lot of people were catching on to this year and we're getting really excited about. He had a pretty good breakout season, I would say, this year. Now, just to run through it, he was a pretty darn good college player out of Oregon. His career at Oregon, he hit 354 with a 465 OBP and a 506 slugging percentage. His final season, he hit 392 and had an 1154 OPS. So he was starting to show power, which he really hadn't flashed at any other point in his career. Pretty decent speed, walks more than he strikes out. Always a factor that I'm interested in when it comes to prospects. He had a solid debut as a pro overall last year in just 93 plate appearances after getting drafted. He was a second-round draft pick. He had 293 with a 419 OBP and a 400 slugging percentage. So not a lot of that over-the-fence power, but 9 stolen bases. This season, at high A and double A, he hit 277 with a 420 OBP. That's a pretty big key because that's one of his strengths is getting on base. And a 453 slugging percentage, 16 home runs, and 14 stolen bases. So flash over the fence power this year seems like it's developing.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty decent speed. It's not going to be game-changing speed, but decent speed. Scout the Statline likes to comp him to Ricky Weeks Jr., who was also a great college player, didn't quite translate to being a fantastic pro, but that's a pretty decent comp. His hit tool grades out at 60, above average. The power is only 45, so average area, maybe a little below average, and speed of average speed 50. So I am interested in this guy. I particularly like his plate approach. He's a guy that gets on base and he can do some damage because of that. But I don't see it as superstar here.
Sure. Yeah. And so I fall into this trap just a little bit. And I do it every year. I miss on college guys quite a bit. Guys that come in that are, already 21 years old, out of college. And I just miss them. And it's a fault of my own.
I mean, depending on how his season goes next year, I could see him being a potential later season call-up. And his trend was really nice. He was really starting to hit well closer to the end of the season. After he got called up to Double A, more of the power started emerging. So he's a potential breakout for 2023. I know I was kind of like, I don't know if I see a superstar here. Of course, I can't tell the future on what this guy's development is going to be. It looks promising, so there's always a possibility. So, I mean, if you want to get in before that happens, if you feel like it will, then I would say now is the time to pounce.
And you're right. The strikeout percentage compared to the walk percentage, really sexy. And then the counting stats, having 16 home runs and then 14 stolen bases. It's a really nice season. It really is. And sitting in Double A already at 22 years old. All right. We have Owen Casey, Chicago Cubs, 19 years old. What do we got on Owen Casey?
Okay. Owen Casey came up last year in 2021 as an 18-year-old draftee, was a second-round draft pick by the Padres, actually, ended up with the Cubs. Pretty big guy, 6'4", 190. He made his debut last year. They were aggressive with him. He mashed through rookie level. Check out his rookie level stat line. He hit 349 with a 478 OBP and a 596 slugging percentage. I was real excited about this guy when he first debuted. That was 136 plate appearances. They were aggressive with him, and they promoted him straight into single A that same season. He got 90 more plate appearances. The numbers came down to earth. This year, he had, I would say, a down season compared to last year, at least that nice-looking debut. And I think it's the strikeouts that are holding him back. And even last year, his strikeout rate was fairly high. I think he was able to hide that because he was walking a lot. He was hitting with a lot of power. It caught up with him a little bit at high A this year. His stat line on the season was 254 batting average, 349 on base percentage, and a 402 slugging percentage. So that power was not quite as strong as last year. He did hit 11 home runs and he stole 11 bases. So that's Owen Casey with the Chicago Cubs. I'm intrigued by him. but I do have to acknowledge that this year was a bit of a letdown. 19 years old in high A, though, that's still a fairly aggressive assignment. So it's not like he's somebody that you should write off at this point. That's for sure.
Yeah, he got into those strikeout numbers that I don't like again. 96 hits, 124 strikeouts. I think we're going to see this as a trend as we talk about more and more players. Is there's a lot of guys that do this, ton of strikeouts, with a 254 average and 11 home runs. I think I can deal with 124 strikeouts. Agreed?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of wait and see. Like, if he rebounds in 2023, I'm fully on board, but I'm watching real closely to see how he starts the season.
This will be a double-A guy at 20 years old, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that he's going to start there. He very well might. But it wouldn't surprise me if he repeated high A for a little while, and if he started hot, then got the bump. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. His strikeout rate last season was 28.6%. That's a little high. But as a guy that I think has a lot of power, I think the slugging percentage will be much higher. So if he's able to tap into that, it's higher than I'd like, but it's not
scary yet. Yeah.
It's not scary.
Yeah. Could be a fun guy to watch, though. Yeah, certainly plugged on the watch list.
Yep, absolutely.
See if he can control those strikeouts, and then we could see something pretty special. Has a long way to mature. 6'4", 190. He could bulk up and be a real contender in the power department.
Yeah, our ETA tool has him right now slotted for 2025 debut.
Does he have a comp?
He does. John Vanderwall. Does that ring a bell?
No.
He had some pretty good seasons. It looks like he mostly was a pinch hitter, but he came up and he played full-time for the Pirates, and he had one season where he hit 299 with a 410 OBP and a 563 slugging percentage. Pretty good. 972 OPS. That was really the pinnacle of his career, it looks like.
Jumping in number 25. And someone I'm really excited to talk about, Jonathan Clace. Seattle Mariner at 20 years old. And if you like speed, you're going to love Jonathan. Yep. This guy is, man, he's got the wheels, man. So 2019 had 223 at-bats in the DSL, the Dominican Summer League. And he batted 300, had 31 stolen bases, coupled that with a couple dingers, 2 dingers, 7 triple baggers, and 12 doubles. So really, really tore up the DSL. Really, really liked his stats there. And then he came to the States in 2021 and batted 245. Nothing great there, but only had 49 at bats. But he still had 49 at bats, and he only had 12 hits. He had 16 stolen bases. So, and then of course this year got a bigger sample size of Jonathan. 423 at bats, 22 doubles, 11 triples, 13 home runs, which I don't think that's what this guy is going to be, but if he is, that's fantastic. And he had 55 stolen bases. The strikeout percentage really popped this year. He struck out 133 times and only had 113 hits. So that's a little scary, but he was walking a lot too. He had 65 walks on the year. So overall slash line, 267 average, 373 on base percentage, 463 slugging, OPS of 836. Damn good year. And man, 55 stolen base is a lot.
Yeah. To your point, this guy is 100% about the stolen bases. The bat needs some work. I think a lot of his success is going to hinge on his OBP rates, and he does walk at a pretty good clip. He strikes out way too much, but if he's able to get on base, he's going to do damage with the wheels. And he's got decent power for a guy that's known for speed, which is interesting. So this is one of those guys that could really be a difference maker, if not for the bat, which I am super skeptical of. I'm not going to lie. Looking through the Scout the Statline data, they have an ETA on him that's way far back. They think 2027, so 5 years down the road.
Maybe 25, 26.
Which would put him at 25, and that is probably related to his WRC plus projection, which is only 93.4. So it's a little bit lower, and that tool is going to look at, are they closer to replacement level? Then they might need more time in the minor leagues. So it's really going to hinge on whether he's able to get on base enough to use those wheels. He's only got a 40 hit tool, according to the Scout grade equivalency for hit. Actually 50 power, that's league average. So if he can figure out a way to hit a little bit more, I mean, he's got league average power and 65 speed. And he might even be a little faster than that. I feel like that's even selling him short a little bit. He projects for, at peak, 16 home runs per 600 plate appearances and 30 stolen bases per 600 plate appearances.
What's his comp sitting at?
His comp is Carlos Gomez, who is somebody you probably do remember. So he's Carlos Gomez had a pretty long career with the Brewers. Yeah. Very similar kind of guy. He stole a lot of bases. He hit home runs. His bat was, he had some seasons where his bat was pretty decent, but for the most part, his bat was a little questionable through most of his career.
Couple all-star appearances.
Couple all-star appearances, you're right. I mean, he was even top 20 MVP voting a couple times. So
yeah. He's a small guy. So Jonathan Clace, he is a small guy. 5'8", 150 pounds. So he needs to pack some muscle into that frame, which might slow him down. It could be a little scary there, but 150 pounds, you can't play the major league 150 pounds. Well, Ichiro did it.
For me, I'm not buying into it quite yet. I want to see if he can hit first. If he shows that he can, then I'd be all over it.
The wheels excite me. Wheels on anybody excites me. It just, I don't know, it's something about my flavor of fantasy baseball players. I really like speed. All right, let's jump to the next gentleman on our list. Number 24, Gabriel Martinez, playing with the Toronto Blue Jays, and he's 19 years old. Gabriel Martinez, what do you have on Mr. Martinez, Ross?
So Gabriel Martinez is somebody that I do like quite a bit. You know, in contrast to Clace, he doesn't have a lot of speed. There's not a lot there. But this guy's only 19 years old. He made it to high A, so he advanced a little bit further, and the bat's there. On the season, well, let's walk through his career a little bit. I'm going to ignore his earlier years in the DSL, as he was 16 years old, and we're talking about that being years ago. But last year, 2021, in rookie level, and he had a few appearances at single A as well. Overall on the season, he hit 330 with a 442 OBP and a 411 slugging percentage. Didn't have any home runs, but the bat was certainly there, and he walked as much as he struck out. So that's very promising to me for an 18-year-old. Not even just at the rookie level, he advanced a little beyond that. This year, following it up, he started at single A, and he advanced to high A. numbers were not quite as strong, but they were pretty close. This year he hit 293 with a 355 on base percentage, and he started flashing some power and 477 slugging percentage. 14 home runs on the season. Again, not a lot of stolen bases that you're going to find in his profile. The walk to strikeout ratio was down a little bit this year, but that's going to be a hard ratio to keep up as you move through the minor leagues. So I think it's a very promising start to a young career. I think we could see him in Double-A next year as a 20-year-old, and that's pretty nice. And if he has a really big season, sky's the limit. What do you think about Gabriel Martinez?
I like him. I think that's the best way to say it too, is I just like him, because it's not eye-popping yet. It certainly could be, especially with the 11 home runs that he threw out in Single-A in 2022. Grew into that power, which, came out of nowhere. He had no existing power before that, and then started to show some pop, and then kept the walks and the strikeouts in a reasonable range. This would be a guy to target now and hope that he explodes, but he doesn't even need to explode because he's already a good baseball player.
Yeah, so I'd like to walk through some of his peak projections.
Yeah.
So his slash line at peak is 260 batting average with a 329 OBP and a 413 slugging percentage. None of that is anything particularly, exciting, but his walk rate is 9%. Strikeout rate is only 13%. And that's the thing that has me most interested in him, is keeping that strikeout rate down.
So that's where I say, he's already a good baseball player. Now he can grow into being a really good baseball player.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, there we have it. That was Gabriel Martinez. Now we're going to jump into Kanan Smith Jigbaugh, Pittsburgh, 23 years old. I really like this guy. And I've tried to keep him quiet. 23 years old. He was a fourth rounder by the New York Yankees in 2017. Came out of high school, but just a few of his numbers here. Started off pretty measly. 2017 at rookie ball, hit 289, 5 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 187 at bats, kind of him-haw. 2018, really, really poor year, 152 at bats, only batted 191 with 3 home runs, nothing to talk about. 2019 started to get exciting. He had 449 at bats and 11 home runs and 16 stolen bases with a 307 average and 465 slugging. The strikeouts, this is an interesting one. So he does have a high strikeout percentage. He had 108 in 449 at bats, but he coupled that with 74 walks. So what do you do with that?
Yeah, I have a really hard time getting a read on this guy.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of consistency with his numbers over the years. Like, you look at that rookie season at 18 years old, he walked more than he struck out, very promising. And then 2018 happened, and who knows what went on there. Just awful numbers in a smaller sample. 2019, very promising numbers. Started showing power, and I had in mind that this guy was more of a power hitter, but now he's played 2 seasons in the high minors with no power.
Yeah.
Practically no power showing. I just have such a hard time getting a read on this guy. I don't know what he is.
I'll tell you what he is. He's a Pittsburgh Pirate.
He's gonna fit right in. Yeah. He did make it to the major leagues this year. Looks like he only played in 3 games, so very, very small sample. But that's a good sign. He's made some progress. Again, I just don't know. He had a really hot start to his season. I don't know. No power. Pretty good plate discipline. I just cannot get a read on him. So instead of even bothering, I'm just going to tell you what his peak projections say. Average peak projection for this guy is 249 batting average, 352 OBP, and a 356 slugging percentage. He's got a 60 rating for Scout grade equivalency, hit tool, only 40 for power. This from a guy that I was saying at one point I thought he was going to be like a power hitter, and a 50 rating for speed. So average on speed, below average power, and above average hit. I think that pretty much sums it up in a hodgepodge career that you can't really make too much out of.
Yeah. And he's a big guy.
As a guy that like analyzes data and trends, I'm not very often stumped, but I just can't make anything out of those numbers.
That's probably why I like him so much, just because he's like this weird anomaly. But he is a big guy. He's 6 foot 230. He's strutting some stuff out there.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I want everybody to target him because I think he's going to be very, very interesting. Something in between the stats. Let's move on from Kanan Smith-Jigba, and let's move in number 22, Mr. Bobby Barrel. I'm talking about Robert Hassel III. Just got traded from the Padres to the Washington Nationals. He's 20 years old. I have a huge bias towards this player, so I'm going to let Ross run with this one and just let him give you the stats. But I want everybody to know that Bobby Barrel is my hero.
So I was going to say, Brian, you should run with this one because I know you love him.
Yeah.
But I'll go ahead and I'll do the rundown of the stats and then I'll turn it back over to you. So Robert Hassel played this season as a 20-year-old. He's now 21. Last season made his debut, and we're talking about the number 8 overall pick in the 2020 draft. So last season made his debut in the low minors, single A and high A. 516 plate appearances. He hit 303 with a 393 OBP and a 470 slugging percentage. Pretty good slash line for a 19-year-old in the low minors. He hit 11 home runs and 34 stolen bases. So a lot of speed coming out of that position in practically a full season worth of plate appearances. Oh. This season was a bit of a mixed bag, I would say. So he started, again, repeating high A, which is maybe not ideal, but last season he only had 87 plate appearances, so not surprising that he started there. He played a little more than half a season there. Again, put up pretty good numbers, 299 batting average, 379 on-base percentage, and a 467 slugging percentage. 10 home runs and 20 stolen bases. So again, showing the power speed combo. Where things started getting a little sticky for him is after he was promoted to Double-A. Really, a lot of this has to do with when he
got traded
to the Nationals.
Yeah.
He seemed to start slumping at that point. So in high A with the Nationals, his numbers started lagging. They promoted him to Double-A. I'm not going to dwell on the high A stats too much because it's a pretty small sample. But in 122 plate appearances at Double-A, he only hit 222 with a 312 OBP and a 296 slugging percentage. That slugging percentage is way too low. Even for somebody that's just a contact hitter, that's way too low. So his numbers overall in the season, I think they were brought down quite a bit from that period. And I don't know exactly what was going on with Robert Hassel, but I know he was kind of becoming a favorite of a lot of analysts out there. somebody that getting into the top 10 range. I know like Eric Cross, that was like one of his favorite players, and he's one of your favorite players. That finished the season. I hope that there was an injury maybe that was hampering his production, or maybe it had something to do with his trade to the Nationals, and just a new organization and uncertainty that was bothering him. But it's not a real promising stat line for somebody that's a top 10 prospect.
Sure. There's been a few other players that I know you've been very keen on that have had this trend, I guess, if you want to call it that. What I see out of this trend, and I could be completely off base, so take this with a grain of salt, but it looks like he struggles with change. He blows up A, goes to A plus, and just struggles. And then he repeats A, crushes it, gets traded, and just struggles. So the trend to me looks like he doesn't like change, but then he figures it out. So I'm really excited for this year to see him in Double-A. He'll be 21 all year. Yeah, he'll be 21 all year in Double-A, to see what his stats look like, because I think he's going to annihilate it. And I kind of want to be proven right and see him get called up to Triple-A and for him to slump, because that's exactly what I see in all these stats right here, is that just a little bit of a change and he falters, but then he figures it out. Which,
yeah, I think that's a pretty astute observation. I mean, I don't know that I picked up on that quite as much, and I think the trade to the Nationals kind of threw me off a little bit, but that makes a lot of sense, that it has to do with change. I know exactly what you're thinking about. There's an adaptation period, right? It takes a little bit of time to get adjusted to your surroundings, and that could be in all regards. That might be being with the new team. It might be facing a new level of pitching, seeing new pitches and different kinds of pitches, and the new level of pitching being a little more adept at exploiting your weaknesses.
It's something as small as you have a different color uniform on. Honestly, just those little things that you need to get, dialed into.
Adaptation is a profound process.
Yeah, for sure.
You learn how to survive in the world.
Some of those changes got to be rough on people. So I appreciate stats doing this, and I see it quite a bit, especially when you see like 100 at bats and their stats are just in the toilet. Well, they just had to change their whole lifestyle.
Do you still see an all-star in Robert Hassel?
Yes. I want to say that I see more than an all-star out of Bobby Batts. I actually think that he's going to be a premier player in the entire league. I think he's going to be unreal. And I think he's going to lead off for the Nationals for the next 12 plus years. He'll be starting in the bigs in 2024.
That's what our ETA tool says too, 2024.
And he'll be 22 years old.
I think the ceiling for him could be a guy with maybe slightly above league average power and pretty good speed, possible 2020 kind of player. He doesn't grade out that well at Scout the Statline. They see him as 11 home runs and 16 stolen bases on average. It's not far off. He'd have to exceed that power output expectation a little bit, but I think it's possible, and he's got the pedigree to do it too. So it's just a matter of if he does figure out those levels as we were talking about and figures it out at the major league level, I think he could be an impact player.
So really, really high regards on my side, and Ross is kind of ho-hum.
I like him. I think he's slightly overrated, but I do like him.
Okay. Coming in Let's go to number 21, a Colorado Rocky, 20 years old, Zach Veen. I really am intrigued by Zach Veen. I'm not a full fangirl on him yet, but I'm close. When he first came up, it was in 2021. He was one of those guys that got drafted in 2020, so we lost a year. But he came in. He came in 2021 at single A at 19 years old, had 399 at bats, batted 301, 36 stolen bases, 15 home runs. Strikeouts were a little touch high. 126, walked 64 times, on base percentage 399, slugged 501. OPS was over 9. So anything over 900 in OPS, I get pretty excited. That's a pretty telltale sign that you're doing everything right. And then in 2022, he got the call up to A+, had 342 at bats there, batted 269, but had 50 stolen bases and 11 home runs. On base percentage 368, slugging 439, OPS it was still high at 807. And then he got a call. He got a call to Double A, had 124 at bats, and it wasn't pretty. Batted 177, but I'll take that. The leap from A+ to Double A, I think now you're starting to play against professionals. Really excited to see what he's going to do in 2023. What do you got, Ross?
So this is a little similar to Robert Hassel, I think.
Yeah.
This profile screams a lot of the same stuff we just talked about with him. Pretty decent power. He's probably got a little bit more power than Hassel does.
I would agree.
And probably a little more speed too.
It doesn't look like he screws up on the bases either. He rarely gets caught stealing.
So a little more power, a little more speed. I'm going to say his bat is a little. It's not quite as strong looking as Hassel's. He strikes out at a little higher rate than I would like, than I'm real comfortable with. But he does have that power. He does have that speed. He was drafted one behind Hassel.
Was it 8 and 9?
8 and 9. So you can kind of see the trade-offs right there. I'm interested in him. I'm not totally discounting that Double A transition, but I am willing to be lenient about it. He grades out with Scout the Statline almost exactly as I just described. I'm looking at the numbers now. A little weaker bat than Robert Hassel. More home runs, more stolen bases, higher strikeout rate, slightly higher walk rate, which is good. I think he could be an impact player. I think there's more risk in his profile than Hassel's. I would be more sure of saying that Hassel is going to be a competent major leaguer than Veen, but Veen has higher star power.
I can see that. Well, let's move into our next fella, Alejandro Osuna. And he plays for the Texas Rangers, 19 years old. Another guy that's got some wheels, man. Why don't you run over Osuna's stat line for us?
Absolutely. Okay. Alejandro Osuna. He started out really hot this year and was definitely on my radar. Let's start a little earlier in his career, we'll go back last year. At 18 years old, he's just turned 20, by the way, so he played, I think, this entire season at 19. In 2021, as an 18-year-old, he debuted at Single A, which is a very aggressive assignment for an 18, which is interesting. It suggests a couple things. Well, it suggests that the Rangers have some faith in him being a pretty decent ball player to start him out there. But he did struggle. He only hit 224 with a 349 OBP and a 383 slugging percentage. Stole 17 bases and hit 6 home runs. There's a bit of a power speed combination in there from this gentleman. This year, at age 19, he started the season at single A. He eventually was promoted to high A. His aggregate stat line on the season was a 302 batting average, a 378 on base percentage, and a 427 slugging percentage. So he had a pretty good year. He hit 9 home runs on the season and he stole 34 bases. So decent power and pretty good speed, though he was caught stealing 18 times as well. So a high volume of stolen base attempts. He was caught in a third of them. So a little more than a third of them. What do you think? Do you like him?
I hate the 18 caught stealing stolen bases. That's a lot.
Yeah.
But man, he's not afraid to pull the trigger. That's for sure. On base percentage looks really good. Another one of your guys that the strikeout and the walk percentages are right there. They're kind of hand in hand. Really, really patient. I think the power's probably surprising just by looking at it. I don't know if he's going to be a power guy. These guys are tough to look into the stats and get too crazy about them yet because they're so darn young. But they're certainly aggressive with him. They obviously think he's going to be something. Who do we got for a comp for Ozuna?
Okay, Osuna draws a comp to Gerald Williams, who started his career as a Yankee. This guy was mostly a kind of a role player, journeyman, bounced around in Milwaukee, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, the Mets. He was kind of all over the place. Career 255 hitter with a 301 OBP and a 410 slugging percentage. He did have decent power and speed. Never really put together a season where he did great in both, but he did have 20 home run seasons and he had 20 stolen bases. So I wouldn't say that that's a super flattering comp. It's probably a realistic comp.
Yeah.
But hopefully this guy can exceed those numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this is just interesting. It's interesting to me that the last few guys that we've highlighted all have this power speed combo. We didn't see that a lot with our other positions. And granted, this is outfield. It's a different skill set. But it is interesting that a lot of these guys seem to possess both tools pretty well. And we've seen, with the catcher position, we did see a lot more speed than I think we expected, or that most people would expect. But we didn't see that at first base, and as you wouldn't probably expect to. But a lot of these guys' profiles that we're talking about in this range, they seem pretty similar.
Yeah.